Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to give you guys the digitally digested segment for the new Apple iPad. Of course, this is Apple's third gen iPad. I've been using the product for roughly a month now, so I'm confident in what I'm about to share with you guys. Really not going to spend a lot of time going through all the features, but rather focus on whether or not it's a realistic upgrade for people out there who, let's say, are thinking about moving from the second gen iPad, the iPad 2, or 1 for that matter, or if you're in the market for, just the latest and greatest best tablet on the market, certainly this has to be on your short list. So let's talk about this new iPad and what it has to offer. So the first thing that's going to jump out, obviously, aesthetic is pretty much identical to previous gen iPads. Picture frame look, very simple, minimalist on the buttons, which I'll show you guys when I go over the body. Still have your home, button there at the bottom. Front-facing camera has not been improved. The rear has no LED flash, which kind of surprises me. Even though I don't care about cameras, if you're going to draw attention to them, you should do them right. And Apple certainly, with features like FaceTime, it just surprises me that since part of the marketing is there, why wouldn't they improve that front-facing cam? But moving away from the cameras, let's talk about that screen. You now finally have a Retina display. Apple, of course, known for a great display in the iPad 1, which was 1024 by 768 IPS panel. Unfortunately, they carried that over into the second gen iPad, and a lot of people were expecting a Retina display back in 2011 since, they got a Retina display for their iPhone 4S. And while I'm all for pixel density, it's questionable as to whether or not it's justifiable to spend fresh money simply for this screen. Now, granted, the screen is fantastic, folks. You're looking at a tremendous leap, not just for Apple, but for the industry. This is a 2048 by 1536 resolution IPS display that's over 3 million pixels. So everything is going to look great on it, really sharp text. The experience, I can tell you right now in the time I've spent with it, just as smooth as the previous gen iPad. And that's a good thing and a bad thing. Obviously, a good thing because it's what you have come to expect from Apple. A bad thing in that I haven't seen a maturation of this OS, which I'll get to in a moment. But the screen, I can tell you right now, fantastic, very sensitive, fluid, just really smooth, and all the colors will pop, pictures and videos will look great. One thing that does bother me is that, of course, you're still looking at a 4:3 aspect ratio here, nothing widescreen. So even though you've got this great, beyond 1080p display, you're never going to be able to see native HD content like Blu-ray quality on a device like this. Now, granted, it is a 9.7-inch display. Apple's really not trying to market it for that element, but at least in my mind, when I saw, heard the number on the resolution for this display, I was just thinking, why can't this be widescreen? But moving right along, getting off the widescreen topic, I want to reassure you guys, the screen is fantastic. But if you own an iPad 2, go down to a store, take a look, you got to see them side by side. In fact, even if you don't own an iPad 2 and you're just considering this tablet, definitely see it in person first. Don't just buy it based on the numbers. You should never do that in life. I shouldn't have to tell anyone that. But the point is that I do see the difference, but I can't tell you how many customers on launch day could not see the difference between this display and the second gen iPad. So definitely see it in person, but it's fantastic. I'm really happy that Apple has done this. They did, at least in one regard, push the envelope. I'm not sure how this will translate in terms of performance and applications, because there are not a lot of games out there for it right now that utilize that resolution, and it's really tough to drive just about anything at this resolution other than a simple experience like browsing the web, which is why that's all I'm showing you guys today. But, of course, the jump in resolution to have the Retina display is really aimed at e-reading, and whether or not, you're going to take advantage of that is really a matter of your eyes, frankly. Apple's marketing indicates that, put it under a magnifying glass, you're going to see, the degradation of the pixels and the text. And in my mind, if you need a magnifying glass, we've already gone off of the path of reality. And I'm not saying that this display is not fantastic. It is. But if the marketing, requires a magnifying glass and you don't require a magnifying glass, I'm left to be a little bit confused. And literally, if you go to Apple's website, they do show the iPad 3 and 2 side by side with a widget you can basically slide over to see, the pixel patterns. And pretty much every review on the internet has put this under a magnifying glass. And I'm just simply not going to justify doing that because it's absurd. It serves no purpose. Until I start seeing people using the magnifying glass in order to read on this, you know, I don't see the utility of demonstrating what it would look like under a magnifying glass. But to end that rant, let's go ahead. Of course, the mega jackpot there, the lotto underway there. But let's talk about going beyond the screen. What else has been improved? Okay, they doubled the RAM, so you got a gig of RAM now, you know, which is a good thing, something that certainly was missing. But whether or not it's good enough for 2012, I can't really tell you guys. It's a matter of personal preference and use. Clearly, a top of the line, similarly, in fact, exactly the same price tablet like the Transformer Prime, you know, only a gig of RAM, but a quad-core processor. Now, the iPad, I was going to say 3, but the new iPad does have a quad-core GPU, which does, you know, promise to deliver on the gaming front. But if you're not going to be gaming, I can tell you guys that the experience overall is pretty much identical to the iPad 2. So if you think you're going to get a big performance boost from the A5X, which is still a dual core, much like the original A5 found both in the iPad 2 and the iPhone 4S, I'm going to tell you guys in advance, you are not going to see that difference. However, if you're planning on gaming, certainly the edge goes to the 3rd gen, the new iPad. No question about it. But I do see that high-res screen being a challenge for developers as time goes on, even with that GPU. Because every GPU gets old and tired eventually. We all know that. And if you don't, now you do. But the point is that it's going to be challenging. It's challenging in the desktop computing market. I don't see why it won't be challenging in pretty much every other element, especially mobile. So I welcome this new high-res screen. It's great. The A5X, I'm disappointed, frankly. When I look at what I saw, you know, in January at CES 2012, pretty much every company that showed me a dual-core based tablet, internally in my mind, I had to question what their motives were. And really the answer was obvious. It's the bottom line. You know, in 2012, if you're still pitching dual-core tablets, if you're pitching tablets, really bottom line, that aren't more powerful than the phone I carry on a day-to-day basis, what's the purpose of having it? And, you know, originally my largest criticism of the original iPad was that it really was nothing more than a bridge device. It could not replace, you know, a netbook, a laptop. And unfortunately, that criticism still stands today. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, customers out there, this won't suit their needs. And for a lot of you, it probably can replace those devices. But I mean from a purely technical standpoint, in terms of what tablets are able to do today, the iPad 3 or new iPad or 3rd gen iPad, at least from a software standpoint, is still stuck in 2010, unfortunately. So that's something that disappoints me overall about this tablet and from Apple, because after all, they did revolutionize the business. This tablet, this 3rd gen tablet, does represent pretty much, you know, where it all got started. Without that original iPad in 2010, tablets are not a you know, everyday device that you can find in every walk of life consumer. So I expect more from the company that started it all. Maybe my expectations are too high. It's not like I'm asking for Flash. I'm simply asking for a more interconnected ecosystem. And I think a lot of Apple users know what I'm talking about in terms of applications that they use on their iPad or their iPhone not being able to communicate with one another. It doesn't apply to all of them, but it applies to a lot. And from an Android perspective, I've seen far more maturation with Android in the 1 year that they've been in the tablet business than now the ongoing, you know, coming into the 3rd year with Apple. So that's my software critique. That's part of the reason Apple has been able to get away without, you know, really shelling out the cash to go to that quad-core processor, is because, frankly, they can, you know, say it's not justified, it's unnecessary. But the fact remains that, in my opinion, in 2012, you should have a tablet that's more powerful than your phone. And right now, if you own an iPhone 4S, the only element or two elements beyond obviously the high-res screen, which we're not comparing, but in terms of hardware, is that extra RAM that you don't have in your iPhone, and obviously the quad-core GPU, because the 5X, negligible difference in processing performance. So beyond the processor, beyond the RAM, beyond the screen, everything else pretty much identical. You're not going to be able to expand storage, but for many of you that's irrelevant. After all, this is a media consumption device. I can't stress that enough. The iPad is not designed to be a personal computer, so I don't want people to think that that's the expectation I have. I simply have to compare it to what is, in my mind, the other best tablet on the market right now, at least that should be on everyone's shortlist, which is the Transformer Prime. So that's the other thing I want to talk about. So if you're thinking about the Transformer Prime, what I can tell you is that while the iPad has the higher res screen, and that is geared towards e-reading, the Prime makes an appearance here very briefly, doesn't have that high-res screen, but because it is super IPS Plus in terms of its display technology, it will be brighter in direct sunlight. So even though it doesn't have that high-res so that you can pull out your magnifying glass, it does have brightness so that in a bright exposure, a nice day, if you actually ever take your tablet out of your house, some do, some don't, you will be able to see a little bit better. That I can tell you from personal use. I have both. This is not a lie. Beyond that, it's just a matter of personal preference and what you're going to do with the iPad. As I mentioned before, if you have the iPad 2 and you don't game, no reason to get this device unless you're absolutely in love with the screen. That, or obviously in the need of having onboard LTE. That's obviously a big deal. For Android users, not so much because we have had LTE around now for over a year. So not in tablets necessarily, but in phones at the very least, which obviously do act as hotspots. I don't think I need to fill in the blanks for you guys. So the point is that really whether or not the iPad is right for you comes down to what you need to do with it. Again, my biggest critique is that they should have put a quad-core processor in here. For a lot of you, that's meaningless, but like I said before, I expect more from the company that really started it all and sets the standard. While they did push the envelope with this new high-res screen, which we will see from all manufacturers come summertime for Android, they really didn't do anything beyond that. Like I said, for battery life, they simply doubled the size of the battery, made the tablet 2 millimeters thicker or whatever it is. Last year the marketing was about how much thinner it was. This year that went out the window because they needed a bigger battery. And I would have liked to have seen them maybe do, a little bit more on the, revolutionizing end than evolutionary end of things. So I think that really sums it up. Still a fantastic product, still going to remain, the best-selling tablet for now in terms of sheer numbers. And a lot of that is to do with really, in my mind, quality control. Because again, going back to that comparison, if you're thinking about the Transformer Prime as opposed to the third-gen iPad, a lot of people will say, well, there are not a lot of games. I actually read this, for the Transformer Prime. This is a current theme. Android doesn't have a lot of games. Now, that's when comparing it, obviously, to this third-gen iPad you're looking at. However, those users also aren't the type of people that in their mind think about all of the emulators and the fact that, with a dock like this for the Prime, you've got the ability to hook up an Xbox 360 controller and play pretty much every game from your childhood that has ever been made. Something that clearly you're not going to be doing with the iPad. So two very different, fields of thought there. In terms of one person saying, well, there are more games available for the iPad, but that person simply doesn't realize that the Transformer Prime is really, as it goes out of focus, a gaming machine at its core. I mean, you can carry this thing around instead of a console. So even though it doesn't have that quad-core GPU that Apple is bragging about for gaming performance, I can assure you, you'll do a lot more gaming with the Prime if you take the time to find out, how to do it rather than just lean on an app store. But that's the difference, really, folks, between someone who wants an iPad and wants, a Transformer Prime. Now, as far as the rest of the performance, battery life, good. Whole experience is smooth, like I said before. You're going to enjoy using this product. It is still heavy. That's another criticism I have of it. Too heavy, in my opinion, for an e-reader. But then again, so is the Prime. But at least the Prime, I've got that dock sitting there. I don't have to hold it. Obviously, you can get a stand. You can get, a case for the iPad, prop it up. That's not a question. Just something I'm stating here that is of obvious nature. To give you guys just a look, obviously, at the hardware, because I've gone through all the specs and everything. You've got your 30-pin proprietary. The design, some of you have come to love and some of you have come to hate, obviously. You've got your volume rocker, your lock switch for screen orientation, your power button, as well as, of course, lock button. Your rear camera, which as I mentioned has been upgraded. You've got a 5-megapixel camera now, folks, but still, behind the competition, really. In the same way that Apple was really far behind on screen resolution, which is why I think we've got a Retina now here in this third-gen iPad. And Other than that, of course, you've got your 3.5mm headphone jack, but that's pretty much it. The speaker, there is one speaker, pretty good. You know, I would say on par with what you will get out of the Prime. The Prime may be a little bit louder. I do feel a little bit, you know, what's the right word? Let down by both the iPad and the Transformer Prime when it comes to audio. I feel like at the $500 price point, you should be getting stereo speakers. But, you know, that's a really small complaint. Construction and build quality on the iPad, we all know, second to none. I have nothing to say about that. You know, do I wish it had storage expansion? Do I wish that it had HDMI out? Sure. But for many users out there, totally irrelevant. And, you know, that's why I'm showing it to you guys today. So really what it comes down to here is that, you know, if you're looking for the latest and greatest, from Apple at least, you're looking at it here, folks. That's what this tablet represents. Now, whether or not it's a worthwhile upgrade, I think I've given you a pretty clear picture. However, if you're looking to replace something like a netbook or, you know, a laptop for that matter, it simply doesn't do as good a job as something like the Prime with a dock. There's no way to compare it, frankly. And I'm not talking about Flash. We all know that Ice Cream Sandwich now runs Chrome, and Chrome does not support Flash. Flash is no longer, you know, being updated, at least heavily. They said it wasn't, and then updates came out. But the point is that from every other element and aspect, you know, I still see faster maturation from the Android OS, and really at the end of the day, that is what you are paying for. You know, especially with the fact that the Prime now has hardware acceleration, so it's just as smooth and just as fluid as what you find with Apple. That used to be something that couldn't be replicated. Now it is. In fact, it's even improved upon, in my opinion, by the Prime. The only thing Apple still stands to have in its favor beyond its marketing and obviously the pile of money that it's sitting on is really that quality of build. And the QC is fantastic, and that really comes down to economies of scale. You know, Apple's a tremendous company, Asus is not. So as a result, Apple has that leverage, and that comes through completely on the build of this device. You know, it's a rock. And frankly, it weighs as much as a rock. That's not to say that, you know, it's not only a little bit heavier than the Prime, obviously, when the Prime doesn't have the dock, but the Prime is a considerably slimmer tablet. But weight really isn't what it's about, folks. It's about what you expect to get out of the device, and I hope with everything I've told you guys today, I've given you a fairly well-educated perspective to approach purchasing a new tablet, you know. Bottom line is, if you have an iPad 2, only upgrade to this if you need LTE or are in love with the display. If you don't have an iPad 2 and you're looking for a tablet, please wait until the summer or purchase a Transformer Prime if you're willing to go through what is not, obviously, the QC that Apple brings to the table. Anyway, this video definitely ran longer than I initially anticipated. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.